Hi everybody, we're going to talk about Dada and Surrealism today. So Dada termed itself the non-art movement. It was from 1916 to 1922. Many people think that at a meeting in 1916, a paper knife was stuck into a French-German dictionary and was pointing to the word Dada, which in French means hobby horse and in German means quote unquote nothing at all, or a child's nonsense word like meaningless babble. So what is Dada? The Dada movement was anti-war, anti-materialistic, anti-nationalistic. It rejected traditional art standards and used nonsense to represent the senselessness of war and violence. As we can see here, Man Ray's object, the gift from 1921, is an iron with these little spikes in it. Obviously, it makes it ridiculous to think about ironing your clothes with these spikes. It would just rip it up. So it makes the object totally doesn't function anymore. So the interpretation of Dada is meant to be entirely dependent on the viewer. So you get to decide what it means to you. And since it's a lot of nonsense, each person can kind of interpret it differently. Collage was definitely a Dada medium. Some characteristics of Dada, chance and nonsense. They would just throw words out there and make art about it or poems. They used a lot of ready-made objects. Ephemera and offense was another characteristic, and irony, a big characteristic. So some of the artists were Hans Arp, Marcel Duchamp, Francis Picabia, Max Ernst, Man Ray, and Kurt Schwitters. This is a collage by Jean Arp. It's torn and pasted paper on gray paper, and it says it's arranged according to chance. I heard the story that he threw the papers up in the air and then just glued them down where they landed. Although it doesn't really seem like that because they would be overlapping, I would think. So there must be some other, I'm sure there's some element of chance to it. But this is the artwork that you're supposed to know for the 250. It's a ready-made object. It's basically a urinal on its side, and it's titled The Fountain. Marcel Duchamp submitted this as sculpture, which clearly we are now really pushing the boundaries of what art is, right? So the original was from 1917. This is a copy from Marcel Duchamp from 1950. Another one was done in 1964. The original one, the 1917 version, was lost. So this is what he was thinking when he put this together. So this is a quote from Marcel Duchamp. Mutt, because you can see on the side of the urinal, it says R. Mutt, 1917. Mutt comes from Mott Works, the name of the large sanitary equipment manufacturer, but Mott was too close, so I altered it to Mutt after the daily cartoon strip Mutt and Jeff, which appeared at the time and with which everyone was familiar. Thus, from the start, there was an interplay of Mutt, a little fat, funny man, and Jeff, a tall, thin man. I wanted any old name and added Richard, French slang for moneybags. That's not a bad name for a pisterie, a urinal. Get it? The opposite of poverty. But not even that much, just R. Mutt. So that's why he named it R. Mutt. This is an image of the original from 1917. And this photograph was actually taken by Alfred Stieglitz, who's another artist, photographer on your 250. So like I said, the first one was lost. It consisted of a standard urinal. And as you know, like a standard urinal is usually presented upright, but Marcel Duchamp had it presented on its back for exhibition purposes rather than upright. And then it was signed and dated R. Mutt, 1917. The title is a pun because a fountain actually spouts liquid and a urinal collects it. So placing it upside down adds additional irony because it makes it completely unfunctional. Or maybe it symbolizes seeing something familiar in a new way. So the Society of Independent Artists exhibition is where Marcel Duchamp submitted this artwork. It was an American group, and they wanted to bring new possibilities of art to the culture, and they didn't want to reject any works. However, when Marcel Duchamp submitted Fountain, they were like, okay, you're pushing it way too far. So they rejected it, even though they didn't really want to reject anybody's artwork. It was rejected by the board. And then Duchamp resigned in protest against the board, taking it upon itself to veto and effectively censor an artist's work. So this brings up a lot of questions, what kind of questions does this make you think? I mean, at the time they were like, what is art? I mean, if you can just submit a urinal, then like that's really art. So maybe if an artist says it's art, then it can be art. Does the artist have to actually make it? There's a lot of examples of where artists don't really have their hand in the work. So this was really a turning point with art, if you think about it, is art the idea or is it the actual object? Does the artist have to make the object? While Duchamp may have been keeping the tradition of submitting the art to the Paris art scene, the innovation was a bold move. This changed a lot of things. All he did was sign the urinal, and so obviously people were upset. So who are some other artists who really pushed the boundaries and made us think about what art is? We've seen these a lot here. We have Manet. I mean, after looking at the urinal on its side, this painting looks very tame, right? But at the time, this too was rejected by the French Salon in 1863. And for, many reasons. One reason, because the person that is portrayed nude was not a Venus figure. She's just a regular woman. And why would she be nude with clothed men outdoors? So here, Manet is really thinking about, he's not thinking about the subject so much. He's thinking about, oh, I want to paint flesh. I want to paint a landscape. I want to paint a still life. He's thinking about art history. He's using it as an opportunity to, practice painting different things and, different situations. And the people who saw it were only focused on the subject, where Manet was not really thinking that. And then that painting influenced this painting by Matisse, a Fauves painting, where we do see nudes in like a landscape. Again, though, they're not rendered. They're kind of like outlines. There's a lot of very bold and contrasting colors. And then because of this painting, we have Pablo Picasso's Les Deux Amants d'Avignon. And again, this painting was so upsetting to people because why would you be painting prostitutes who are just flat out looking at us, and then also just take away any kind of space, break up the space? It was also a very like a revolutionary painting. So Marcel Duchamp also had his time where he's very important to art. So here's his nude descending a staircase from 1912. This was at the Armory Show in 1913. And so you can see that he was interested in Cubism. And then this painting is called Stoppages. And Marcel Duchamp really wanted, he said that he wanted to put art back in the service of the mind. So what does that mean? If you're putting art in the service of minds, he wants people to think about what he's making. He doesn't want people to just look at it and sort of pass over it and be like, oh, that's really pretty. Oh, that's really nice. He wants you to look at it and ask yourself, like, what is he really trying to say here? What is he trying to portray? What are these things? Why did he put this yellow background with the brown on the top and the bottom? Are these little circles representing something? So he wants people to really think. Okay, so the art term ready-made is a word that you should know. I'm sure you do. The term ready-made was first introduced by French artist Marcel Duchamp to describe the works of art that he made from manufactured objects. It has since often been applied more generally to artworks by other artists made in this way. Here's some more Marcel Duchamp's ready-mades. Bicycle wheel. It's like, so whenever he usually makes the object completely non-functional when he makes the art out of it. So you can see the bicycle wheel being screwed into the stool. Actually makes it a kinetic kind of nice sculpture. All he did, it's a bottle rack. So people would wash bottles out and they would reuse the glass bottles and they would just turn them upside down onto here to let them dry out. Apparently he thought that this was also a beautiful sculpture. So he called that sculpture. And then we're back here to the fountain, the second version by Marcel Duchamp. The first version was from 1917, the second from 1950, and then 1964. It's ready-made glazed sanitary china with black paint. Okay. So, Dada versus Surrealism. Surrealism was absolutely influenced by Dada. So Dada came first. It began before the 1920s, and Surrealism began in the 1920s and was developed from Dada. So Dada was really more about nonsense, and Surrealism was about the workings of the subconscious and like fantastic imagery, and it was influenced by Dada and Sigmund Freud. So Dada used a lot of collage and ready-made objects, where Surrealism painted illogical scenes and creatures using everyday objects. So it seems like they're pretty similar, because they are in a lot of ways, but you should be able to tell the difference between the nonsensical Dada artwork that's usually like a ready-made or collage versus the surrealism. When we think about surrealism, when I think about surrealists, I usually think about Salvador Dali. He's the first person that comes to my mind. So, the paintings that he made were, like based on dreams. They were, kind of fantastical, a lot of them illogical. Giorgio de Chirico, this is one of the first surrealist paintings. It's very ambiguous and foreboding. So, I mean, I don't even know if this is like surrealism yet, but it's sort of like it's coming, It kind of looks like it could have come from a dream. There's this sort of feeling that something bad is going to happen with the shadows and the perspective and the way the light is and how people are running. Surrealism, it originally started as a literary movement, and it explored dreams, the unconscious, the element of chance, and multiple levels of reality. So it was more than real, which is why, like when you look at Salvador Dali or sometimes Magritte's paintings, they look very like hyper real, like better than real, So why surrealism in the 1920s? What was happening in the world around this time? Well, World War I was from 1914 to 1918, and then also Sigmund Freud came around in the 1920s. And so World War I basically destroyed Western civilization. And all of these countries that are on the list here, you can see, well, all of these countries were involved, but, it was physically and psychologically devastating to so many places, especially in Europe. These are some images of what was happening, how it had destroyed Europe. Okay, this just says the logic, science, and technology that many thought would bring a better world had gone horribly wrong. Instead of a better world, the advancements of the 19th century had produced such high-tech weapons as machine guns, long-range artillery, tanks, submarines, fighter planes, and mustard gas. So they're also, blaming technology for all of this destruction. And the destruction and loss of life was staggering. So the total World War I casualties, it's like 11 million people lost their lives during World War I. I think it was the war where the most people lost their lives in any other war. So with surreal paintings, this is actually an example of a surreal painting. We've all seen this, where there's, like a sky inside of an eye or an apple hanging in front of somebody's face, right? So surreal paintings are odd, they're illogical, irrational, exciting, and disturbing. Feel free at any point to pause and write down the characteristics. Some more characteristics. It was a reaction to the chaos of World War I. The influence was of Sigmund Freud, of dreams and the subconscious. The impossible scale is another, I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. Reversal of natural laws, double images, and juxtaposition. Frottage is a technique, you probably all did this when you were a little kid, where you took a crayon and like rubbed it on the sidewalk or something like that. This is called palm tree, and frottage is just that, it's a rubbing basically. So a pencil rubbing made by putting paper over a textured surface. So sometimes we see that. This is Max Ernst's Two Children Are Threatened by a Nightingale from 1924. And this is very early surrealism. It's kind of a mix between collage and painting. The title is intentionally ambiguous. And it sort of seems like a dream, like with people standing on this structure and somebody's chasing something over here. And then, of course, Salvador Dali. You should all know this painting, The Persistence of Memory from 1931. Hyper realistic, like so real. You can see here that this is a self-portrait. So this is like supposed to be a nose and Salvador Dali's eye, and all of these clocks are melting out here in the desert. There's all these ants climbing on this timepiece as well, set in like a very deep landscape. But he renders every detail with very precise control. Also, René Magritte, The Treachery of Images from 1928. So he wants you to believe that images are deceiving. So, ce n'est pas une pipe. Sorry for my pronunciation. I know that you've missed it. I know that you've missed me trying to speak French to you. I'm going to try to just do more of it in these presentations. Anyway, in English, this means this is not a pipe. And if we look at it, we're like, it's absolutely a pipe. What are you trying to tell me? It's not a pipe. Why isn't it a pipe? Oh, because it's a painting of a pipe. It's not a pipe, it's a painting of a pipe. Okay, fine. So people are going to wordsmith. I think this is hysterical. I just saw this the other day and I'm giving this to you. This is not a school. Oh, I miss you guys. Oh, it's not a school. Well, it is. It's our school for now. Okay. Okay, so this is interesting. I took this from a Regents exam or a comprehensive art exam. I still don't know if you're taking this exam or not. I wouldn't worry about it. Hopefully you'll get the art endorsement whether you take it or not. Anyway, this says Magritte challenges viewers' expectations of what? What? How is he challenging your expectations? We have a bed with a ginormous comb on it, and we have like some sort of closet that has like a giant shaving brush, and then this huge glass that looks like it's the size of a person. So what is he doing? He's challenging your expectations of scale, right? The scale is totally absurd. And then something that surrealism was inspired by, dreams, maybe? Okay, those are the two questions. All right, and then this is the surrealist piece on the 250. This is at the MoMA. Maybe you've seen it there. This is called Object by Mara Oppenheim, and it's basically a teacup that's covered in fur. And this has actually become the symbol of surrealism. It's from 1936. And it was inspired by a conversation with Picasso. Uh, Oppenheim had made a bracelet covered in fur, and Picasso said something like, "It's too bad that not everything is covered in fur." And when her tea grew cold, Oppenheim responded to Picasso's comment by ordering a little bit more fur with my tea, like to warm it up, right? It's kind of a cute story. So she went home and she made this object where she covered this teacup in fur. And it's really bizarre, right? Because we think about it, like, what if we were to drink tea out of this cup? It gives you kind of a creepy feeling, right? To think about how the bristles would feel on our lips. So, that's sort of where the surrealism comes in. It's like two things that don't really go together, artists put together. And this is a great example of that. Oppenheim described her creation as not an illustration of an idea, but the thing itself. So it was also nicknamed Déjeuner en Fureur. Sorry. But which basically means breakfast in fur or fur breakfast. And which she wasn't happy about. Like, she didn't want it to be named that, because then that it sort of changes the meaning a little bit. So anyway, with this creation, we can really understand like the visceral memory of how it would feel to be drinking tea out of a cup like this, right? We sort of create metaphors and symbols out of this act of tactile extension. And it's totally up to the individual to interpret. So, how I might imagine this would feel to drink tea out of it, you are probably having a different imagination for it, which is really the whole point of surrealism in itself. So anyway, the interpretation of object has been complicated by the ways that others have assigned meaning to it, which has happened with other artworks, right? So when object was finished, Oppenheim submitted it to Breton for an exhibition of surrealist objects at a gallery in Paris in 1936. She preferred a nondescriptive title. Breton took the liberty of titling it Luncheon in Fur. And this title is a play on two 19th century works of art. So Manet's infamous modernist painting, Luncheon on the Grass, right? So instead of, luncheon on the grass, luncheon in fur. So he was referring back to that painting that we were just looking at of Manet. And also there was an erotic novel at the time called Venus in Furs. So with these two references, he sort of forces this explicit sexualized meaning onto this object. So, it's, if we think about the original inspiration for this work and how it was really just practical, she was, asking the waiter for more fur for her cooling cup of tea. And so it wasn't necessarily overtly sexual at all. And then leave it to André Breton to come and make it overtly sexual, right? So what other artworks can you think of that have changed because of, titles that were assigned to it? I think about these artworks, in these cases of these two on the left, we don't know the title of it because they are prehistoric. So the one on the left is called Running Horned Woman, from the Paleolithic time period, and then the Venus of Willendorf, which we know, we think about like Venuses, so, and how they all got their names. So 19th century archaeologists who found these, these objects, they're assigning meanings to it that aren't necessarily a thing. So, and then on the right, we have Improvisation 28 by Kandinsky, which, we talked about, how he thinks about them as musical compositions. And so, the title kind of forces a meaning onto it, right? This is also Mara Oppenheim called Das Paar, and which means the couple. And it's just a pair of brown shoes that are attached at the toes. And So this is actually was another misunderstanding. She took it to a photographer to be photographed, and the photographer tied the laces up, and Breton called this object de lacier, which in French means to untie. She expressly assigned no gender, and she suggests, the forbidden acts already taking place between the anthropomorphized shoes. She takes a more literal approach. The shoes are expressive things in themselves rather than symbolically resonant of something else. But, that's not to suggest that all of her interactions with Breton were negative. She happened across this very strange photograph of a bicycle seat that's covered in bees. So it was like a found object, the photograph. And then she mailed it to Breton, who, republished the found photograph as an artistic contribution by Oppenheim in the new surrealist publication called The Medium. But this is Mary Oppenheim, Swiss painter and sculptor. She had like an interesting life because she had that early success, when she was very young. She was, like only 20 or something like that, when the Museum of Modern Art bought her object, the teacup, and declared it the quintessential surrealist object. And so that really, after that, everything that she made, she kept like throwing it away, and she was so frustrated. She just like couldn't ever top this thing that she originally made. And then it took her years, like, I don't know how long, maybe when she was finally in her, I don't know, maybe not until like, 1960s or 70s that she sort of re-emerged and began publicly showing her new paintings again. But it took her a long time to sort of get over the fact that like she was never happy with her work, and then she has this quote where she says, "I think it is the duty of a woman to lead a life that expresses her disbelief in the validity of the taboos that have been imposed upon her kind for thousands of years. Nobody will give you freedom. You must take it." Okay, so what does surrealism look like in other parts of the world? Oh, well, here's Andre Masson. Andre Masson. This is also in Paris, and automatism is spontaneous writing or drawing or painting. We also have Juan Miró. You've seen this work, I'm sure. He's a Spanish painter, and it's he claimed Andre Breton claimed that Miró was the most surrealist of us all. Then we have Paul Klee, which I'm sure that you're familiar with. He is a Swiss artist. I love this because it's a watercolor painting. Oh, and then we have the utopian styles that came from Russia. So suprematism and constructivism in Russia. I had sent you a video that I hope that you watched that's also talking about those styles. And basically, some avant-garde artists promoted utopian ideals, believing staunchly in art's ability to contribute to improving society and all of humankind. So photomontage is the process of making a composite image by juxtaposing or mounting two or more photographs in order to give the illusion of a single image. So, I mean, it's sort of like a collage, right? But it can also, include photographs and texts and words and even newspaper clippings. So after the First World War, artists in Germany and the Soviet Union began to experiment a lot with photomontage. And here we have number 137. It's called Illustration from the Results of the First Five-Year Plan by Varvara Stefanova from 1932. It's a photo montage. So you can see that she's really created an entire scene. It's not just a collage of pieces that are just randomly glued down. This is a collage where she sort of creates a foreground and a middle ground and a background. But so the USSR was established in 1922 under Lenin, and This young communist state was celebrated by artists and intellectuals around the world who saw an opportunity to end the corruption and extreme poverty that defined Russia for so long. And as the title suggests, this photomontage is an ode to the success of the first five-year plan, an initiative started by Stalin in 1928. The plan was a list of strategic goals designed to grow the Soviet economy and accelerate its industrialization. These goals included collective farming, creating a military and artillery industry, and increasing steel production. By the end of the first five-year plan in 1933, the USSR had become a leading industrial power, though it's worth noting that contemporary historians have found that economists from the USSR inflated results to enhance the image of the Soviet Union. In this work of art, Stepanova has also used the tools of the propagandists. So this photomontage is an ideological image intended to help establish, through its visual evidence, the great success of the plan. And here is an image of her. She was a talented painter and designer and photographer. She defined herself as a constructivist and focused her art on serving the ideals of the Soviet Union. So this is her in her studio. I think that is her husband. So this is the this is a publication that was in the USSR, that was a propagandist publication. She was a leading member of the Russian avant-garde, and later in her career she became well known for her contributions to this magazine, USSR in Construction. It's a propagandist publication that focused on the industrialization of the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin, who was a ruthless dictator who took power after Lenin's death, and whose policies are thought to have caused suffering and death for millions of his people. The public targeted by the USSR in Construction was mostly foreign. So the purpose of the magazine was to show countries such as France and Great Britain that the USSR was also a leading force in the global market and economy. So as you can see here, her photo montage, everything is very carefully constructed. She only uses 3 types of color and tone, right? So it's like red and black and white, and with this like neutral color as well. She alternates black and white and sepia photographs and integrates geometric planes of red to structure the composition. On the left, she has inserted public address speakers on a platform with the number 5, symbolizing the 5-year plan, along with police cards displaying the letters CCP, the Russian initials for the USSR. The letters are placed above the horizon, as is a portrait of Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union. The cropped and oversized photograph of Lenin shows him speaking, his eyes turned to the left as if looking into the future. He is linked to the speaker and letter place cards at the left of by the wires of an electrical transmission tower. Below, a large crowd of people indicate the mass popularity of Stalin's political program and their desire to celebrate it. Red, the color of the Soviet flag, was often used by Stepanova in her photomontages. She also commonly mismatched the scale of photographic elements to create a sense of dynamism in her images. We're going to see that too, especially when we look at the Harlem Renaissance coming up next. Despite the flat paper format, different elements are visually activated and can seem to even pop out. So several clear artistic oppositions are visible in the result of the first 5-year plan. For example, there's a sharp contrast between the black and white photographs and the red elements, such as the electric tower, the number 5, and the triangle in the foreground. Our eyes are attracted to these oppositions, and by the contrast between the indistinct masses and the individual portrait of Lenin is an implicit reference to the Soviet political system. Okay, This is moving on. Just like skip right past. Okay, so here is Brancusi is moving forward. Remember, we had him from the sculpture The Kiss. Now, they're moving past surface appearances, and we have this called Bird in Space, which you may have seen. This one's at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, but there's definitely a copy at the Met. A larger copy. Okay. The Degenerate Art exhibition, it was a title of an exhibition mounted by the Nazis in Munich in 1937. It consisted of modernist artworks chaotically hung and accompanied by text labeled deriding the art. So here is an image. On the left, we have the Great German Art Exhibition of 1937. And then on the right, we have the Degenerate Art Exhibition, which was right across the street from the Great German Art Exhibition. The Nazis put up both of these artworks, and the main purpose was to discredit modernism. So it was designed to inflame public opinion against modernism. The exhibition subsequently traveled to several other cities in Germany and Austria. So you can see, like, they hung up the artwork, and then they wrote a lot of derogatory things, like around, I don't know what that says, but they're basically like, this is not art. I mean, so mean. Like, I can't even imagine. Anyway, also around the time, this is Barbara Hepworth. Her major contribution to sculpture was the introduction of the hole. I think this is so beautiful. Like, think about what sculpture would be without having, this sort of negative space. Henry Moore, this is Reclining Figure. We've seen a lot of his works all over New York City. And in particular, do you know where this is? Do you know where his work is that we would know? Yes, it's at Lincoln Center. Oh, don't you miss going there every day? I'm sorry, you guys. We'll go back again someday. We can meet over there by the Henry Moore sculpture. Okay, finally, I think this is the last artwork that we're going to talk about today. Frida Kahlo. Yay! Yay, Frida Kahlo, the two Fridas from 1939. Her paintings are personal, but also a reflection of Mexico. So what is this all about? She lived as an artist during a period when many middle-class women sacrificed their ambitions to live entirely in domestic sphere. This double self-portrait, the two Fridas, features two seated figures holding hands, sharing a bench in front of a stormy sky. The Fridas are identical twins, except for their attire, which was a poignant issue for Kahlo at this time. The year she painted this canvas, she was divorced from Diego Rivera. So remember, I'm sure that you guys are all familiar with her story. If you haven't seen the movie Frida, you should absolutely see it. It's so good. It tells a lot about her life. And so she was in a bus accident when she was very young. It left her spine totally messed up. She had to have so many surgeries when she was young, and she spent a lot of time in bed as a young person. And so she started to paint because she didn't have anything else to do. So, like, her father gave her some paints, and they put like a mirror, I think, on the ceiling so she could paint herself. And eventually she did recover, but like she never fully recovered. And then she also married Diego Rivera. There's some quote that she said at some point where she's like, the two great tragedies of my life were the bus accident and Diego, because they were married and then they divorced and then they remarried. So, because they had like a very tumultuous relationship. He was also a lot older than her, So anyway, before she married Rivera in 1929, she wore the modern European dress of the era, which is on the left, evident in her first self-portrait on the left, where she wears a red velvet dress with gold embroidery. Oh, that's this painting here, self-portrait in a velvet dress. Okay, and but with Rivera's encouragement, Kahlo embraced the attire rooted in Mexican customs, which is this dress on the left. So she's trying to embrace her modern side, and then also, you know, her cultural heritage of being Mexican. So this is what I was saying. This is the painting with the velvet dress. Here, in her second self-portrait on the left, or it's not on the left, it's above, her accessories reference distinct periods in Mexican history. Her necklace is a reference to pre-Columbian jade jewelry of the Aztecs, and the earrings are colonial in style, but her simple white blouse is a nod to peasant women. So here's her and Diego. It's called Frida and Diego. It's oil on canvas. You know, she taught herself to paint, so it has like a real folk art, like a folk style to it. This is called My Grandparents, My Parents, and I Family Tree. And so you can see the style. There's a lot, like most of her paintings are self-portraits. Sometimes they're outside. Sometimes, you know, they're like of her family. Sometimes they're showing her pain. She, what was I going to say? So in this painting, there's also, oh, I think I have some up close, at least one up close picture here. So we can see that the woman on the left, or the Frida on the left, is holding this little vein clip thing here. So like the blood is still kind of trickling out onto the white dress. And then here on the right, the woman who's wearing the traditional Mexican dress, she's holding a little locket, a little tiny picture of Diego. So you can see that they share the same heart. This one is bleeding, and there's a lot of symbolism, but it's really nice that they're holding hands. Okay, so that's our girl Frida Kahlo. Love her. All right, this is your assignment. I'm going to pause. I'm going to end it there, but I did want to give credits to all of these sources that I took this information from to give to you. And so here's your assignment. Please write a short essay and submit it in Google Classroom under the Dada and Surrealist assignment. The artworks shown reflect the changes in modern art of the first half of the 20th century. Describe the creation of each work using both visual and/or contextual evidence. Discuss how each artwork reflects a continuity or a convention, or a change in innovation. So as I said earlier, if you read, hopefully you read the stream on our art history Google classroom, but I said that one of the questions on the AP Art History test is going to address the continuity or change. So I've been calling it on your summary sheet convention or innovation, but it means the same thing. So I would go back and make sure all your summary sheets are up to date with this information, talking about, you know, the change in society or the standard, the convention, the continuity that's been going on. So I'm going to leave it here. You can push pause, write this down, and go to your Google Classroom and fill it out. Thanks so much. Have a lovely night. Miss you guys.